Hi, in this video we'll see how we can do the data flow between different kinds of component in Reactjs. So if you already see the previous video of mine, then you'll see how functional component and class component they're working. So this video will see that how you can send data between components, because component is not just a normal things that you see normally in function in JavaScript. It's not like same way you can send data into one function to another one. It's not the same way, but yeah, it's a little bit different way. So you need to follow the process. In Reactjs, this is called data flow. So in the data flow, we'll see how we can flow data, and we have two things: state and props. In a shortly, I will talk what is state and props. What you see here, state and props. So they have little differences. For now you can understand, okay, state is something that one component have, and props is something that one component will receive. Yeah, so let's see more details how the data actually flows between components in Reactjs. So we have a I can show you this picture which is explaining how React data is flowing one component to another one. So look at the example. You have different component 1 2 3 4 5 component we see here, and each component has some data inside him. Like, so just simple example you can understand, okay, it's a function. So component is a function if it's functional component, or it could be a class if it's a class component, and inside there you have some data, his own data. So in this case we call them state. So for now you just think, okay, if you don't understand state, just think, okay, component has some data and he's sending this data to another component and then another component. So it's going like one component to the next one and next one. So it's going like a top to bottom, because normally the usual way of data flow in Reactjs is top to bottom. So parent to child. In this case, this is the parent component, this is his child component, and this is grandchild. So data is going through one by one. So this is one way, but it's also possible to send back data from child to parent. So this is something we will also see here with state and props and how they're working, and we'll see there are different kinds of relation between them. So you see they give a picture arrow here, data. So data go from top to bottom like this arrow, always in the down. But when you have a event means, if you remember in HTML or in JavaScript, if you see on click, on submit, on mouse over, so all this actually some event. So by using event you can also take data from bottom to top, so it goes reverse order. So it's also possible. So that things we will see now, but let's see the difference between state and props when data is flowing. So if I go here and I will see that in a state is normally, you can say state is data inside the component, like his default data or his own data. And for props this is different, because so props is also data, but props means data is coming from another place. So he's not his own data received from outside. And as an example, we normally receive some data from a REST API or from database, and they're sending and receiving using some library. You can use fetch or Axios, and this is coming. And normally props meanings of the name props come from properties. So every component could have properties, but it's not his own properties. And a state is example of, if you know the state, different state in the big country, you have different state. Like in Germany we have NRW, Hessen, Berlin, different state, but not the city. So it's their own information and they have their own rules. So state is like data inside the component, you can say. And state can be update and change anytime. So it's a mutable things. You will learn this word many times, what is mutable. So our state could be change anytime, it could be mutable, and it's also you can change the state data inside his code quickly. So props data cannot change quickly. You cannot change props data anytime you want. So there is a way. Normally you receive some props and you can change them, but you need to change them inside the state. So that's, we will see, like, okay, why you can change the state data anytime, why cannot props, and what is the difference. Also asynchronous data change. So asynchronous means normally nothing is waiting for you, non-blocking. So in this case, when its data is changing and it does not wait for another. So when data is changed, you see the data. So state works like this way. It does not tell you, okay, until I am changing, wait. It's not like this. So that's why it's asynchronous. You can say non-blocking. And then props data, as we already said, is immutable. It's not changing. It cannot be update or change anytime. It can update and change, but not anytime. Yeah. So normally you will change or update the state, but props you will use like sending to another place. When you send to another place, then it will be like a props inside that, but then you will change the state based on props data. Look at this one. This is a simple hello name arif. So what is this? Send props data to hello. This is an example how you send data as a props. So in this case, we write it here. In the hello is a component, name of a component, it could be anything. Name is the data we are sending, but this arif, this name is actually inside this component is a state, but when it's sending to another one, it becomes a props. So here arif is still the data for him, so it's a state. It could be a props inside this one when it's sending back. And this is the example how we write the like here we write hello name, we send like this way. But if it's a class component, we should write class hello extend React component. So this is the component. You already know the component structure. If you don't know, please go back and see my previous video how to create class component. And look at this one. Normally in class component, every they have a constructor. By default, inside constructor they have the state. You have to write this dot state, and because of the class, every place in here you need to use this, but in functional component you don't have to. And it has some own data, like example name, default name. You can also write name arif here. So this is one example of class component. But what happens when this state data is going back to the props? Look at this one. So if this hello is inside here is a state, but now we again create hello and say okay, some state maybe or something, but still if you send, you can write it different name, but I write it same name. So we see okay, now he is a state, but when he will be props, when he is receiving data from another component. So that means if I send hello name arif inside this component from this one, it will come here, and then he will receive it inside. If it's a class component, this dot props. If it's functional component, you just need to write only props and you receive it. So then it's returned something. So in this case, this dot props is coming from that one, that line. It could be arif, it could be name, default name. So whatever you send, but in this line we are sending, in this line we just show the structure. Okay. So if you see the difference, you can see this picture, and then we will actually go to the code, and then we'll see in the code how we can actually create them and what is happening. Okay, so here we can now see the code. I already have in my previous video we created we use app.js using create react apps, and we see that a div is here. Inside the div we have header and different components are created. So they are just component without any state or props. They don't have any data, just some components, and they look like, the view look like this. So this is one component, welcome to my website, just a message. This is some top menu. It's not so nice design because we just explain it quickly and see that this is left menu, how we separated two components, CSS and the footer. Now what we will do, we will actually see how some state we will use, state and props. Let's try this line, welcome to my website. So this message we will write down now here, welcome to, and then some name of the website. It could be any website name. So this data would be a state and props. We'll see how they will be state and props. So look at the code back. Here we have function app, and you see app.js. So this is basic structure from Reactjs. If you have create React apps, if you install and then install it, you will see app.js. So inside app.js I have some file. You don't need to understand all this file. Just look at this one. What is this? This is a functional component. Yeah, and inside this functional component you have some design. This is from also Reactjs. They have a header, but then look at this one, header. This header is giving me this line, welcome to my website. So we need to check this line, this component, where is header, and I have all the component inside component folder. So open the header. Now you see the header is a file, is just a function, nothing else. So there was some lines explaining what is functional component example something, but look at this one. We don't need, this is a class component example. So in this case the header is a class component, not a functional component, and on the tops it's a functional component. So we'll first see the example based on functional component, later we'll see the class component also. So I will maybe comment it for now, and on the tops I'll uncomment the, so this is the same code for this, but this is a functional component example. So if you see the previous video you'll understand, otherwise look at this one. We said okay, functional component, no, it's a structure I write. So this is structure, maybe I'll keep it, or yeah, okay. So here this is my class component and I say welcome to website. Okay, in this case maybe we'll use class component and then we'll see also functional component. So from this component I want to say some or send some data. This is my functional component. Inside functional component you can also have some data, his own data, like his own personal data. So we can say state. In this case we can say state. So it's not mandatory in the functional component you have to write a state, you can write anything, you can write also data, but for understanding we need to write state. But in class component we of course we need to write a state, but this is, look at the function, this is a functional component. So I write here name and I write here Arif. So what we see here, state is object and then we have a name, this is Arif. And now if I can, let's maybe no, let's write it like, we write something like website, and the website name is www.arif.com. yeah. So this data I am sending and the header will actually receive it. So inside header if I write down data, so some data, and you have to write curly bracket. In Reactjs when you send some data or using object, so this is object or any variable, you just need to write curly bracket, not just quotation. yeah. So then they will understand. In a curly bracket if I now write state dot website, they will understand this, and this data is now, so this data is now sending inside the header. But what is this data inside this file, inside app.js, inside this component? This is a state, but when he is sending this data to the class component, so he is sending this data into a class component, and that in here inside there he will be a props. So you can check this after the render process. Here you can, before you see anything in the console log, you can see it like what is coming. So as I in the slide I already told you that anything coming in a class component that should be using a this, and then you have to write props. But if it's a functional component you don't have to write this, I will explain it, but let's look at this one. So first this look like this dot props, and then you will actually see what is coming with the props. Okay, and this props is object because we send a state data, and this is by default every props is object, but we are sending some data which is also another object. That means inside this props you should have this data, but we need to see it first. So if I refresh, state is not defined, line 11. So line 11, state is not defined. Yeah, this is a functional component, and if I write like state, I need to give a variable type. So I have to write maybe a state, constant or anything you can write. Now go back and we see the code. Now if I inspect it in the console log, I should see a object, and look at this header.js line 13, that is coming from header.js line 13, this one. So in the props we see the props in the browser, you can open the props and see what is inside. Inside the props you have now data www.arif.com. so a state becomes props now inside this file. yeah. So if you write this dot props, look at the code again. So this dot props is giving you just this information, data, yeah, www.arif.com. Now if you want to see this in here in this part, you just need to write like here who is giving this object. If I write this dot props, and this dot props, in this case I cannot see, so this dot props is giving me data. If I write down this dot props dot, here I write data, so data is the new name, and then in this case, yeah, I don't see it because I just show it for understanding. Let's write it here. If we write it here, remove this value in the return. You can always console log outside of return in the render process in class component. Okay, so here if I write down now a curly bracket, because as we said before, so data or variable, anything is coming, you have to write in curly bracket. This data is coming from a props, a property that's from outside, so he is receiving it and inside data, and it's just a name, some website name. So if I just refresh it, now you see arif.com is already there, so it's coming from another one, and he is a state in header.js, he is a props, but inside app.js he is a state. So look at the difference, he is a state here, but when he is coming back in this part, he becomes the props. So now you see how the state and props is working. So we are sending inside header.data and then sending this data, and then he is receiving it. Okay, so but it's not always mandatory when you have a functional component, send it like object. You can send also just a string or something. As example, if I don't use this, if I don't send this data, or I just comment it in here, I send okay, so my data should be go like, not like this, it should be actually go like data should be anything. I can also use a string like this if I write it manually. So I can say okay, www.arif.com. so still data will go as object inside that part, and he will read it. But let's see what is happening now. If we refresh, still we see the same. So when I write here state, constant state website, and then a lot of information, so state is holding this, but then I send, because if you send these messages, he will directly send this inside the class component, and class component will receive it inside this dot props. It's okay. But why I write this way? Because I wanted to explain you how the things is actually staying. So if you have a many state, not just one data, in this case we have website, but just assume that I don't have website, I have maybe so many data, not website name, and then also welcome message. Yeah, so then I have maybe another data like okay, welcome to this message, this part I have. So then in the state I am also sending this two things, I am sending website and welcome to message, these messages, and then I save it. And in the header, now if I write here this dot props dot data, then there will be a problem, because now the props does not actually holding website directly, he is holding the state, the object, and you are sending two data, two information. You can send many data. That means this dot props dot data is not enough. This code should be actually this dot props dot, and then there should be the whole state, the object. So you have to write it a little bit different way, but we need to see first. Maybe we will first remove this and see what is the props now, what is actually coming. Refresh. Yeah, so look at this one. This is now the props, and props means a object, and inside object you have data, and then inside data you have a website and welcome message. So it's like more part you have. So you can do it like this dot props dot data dot, and then you have to write website, and then we should see the previous data. Yeah, so it's coming back, and welcome to this part is also coming from the previous, from the state, but in this case he will be props, so you can write it here. If you write this dot props dot data dot, let's check it, here is welcome message, we write it here, and then it's coming back. Yeah, so now he is coming from the top to bottom, and you should see the exactly welcome to Arif. If you change it, the benefit of this way is like now all your data is dynamic. If you say not welcome, hello to this.com, and there you see that hello to, so it's automatically dynamically come, because now this state data is important, because if you use Redux or some kind of way, like some data is coming from database REST API, you can put it everything in a state and then sending back to the props, and he is receiving this one. So in this case, our receiving part is happening in a functional component. So this is a functional component. We see the header. Let's send some data in a it's a class component, but let's send some data as a props as a class component, not a functional component. Yeah, so we can do it like here. So this is our function app. Now if I want to send some data into navigation menu, so look into the navigation menu, and let's see how it looks like. So navigation menu is inside this file, and it's just a function. It's nothing more, it's just a simple function. In the function you just return few navigation. So all this navigation, now I'll send this from the main app.js. So he is also a functional component. From here I will send it, and then navigation will receive them here. But how he will do this? Like Facebook, Google, this name we can directly send from this one. So in this case, as I said, like this is just a object, a variable in functional component. That's okay, there is no problem. We can create many variables like this, and you can send this as a state, yeah, into another one, but you can write it also in another name. So I will write another state, but with a different name, not the word state, for understanding. So let's write constant nav data. So it's for the navigation, we can write the nav data. So it's the object I am creating, and in the object I will write different kinds of maybe I can send an array. So let's look, if we send an array, what will happen? Not a object, because it's an array. So in the array I have maybe Facebook, Google, Twitter, and what I have here, okay, Facebook, Google, YouTube, home, profile. Okay, so not Twitter, YouTube, home and profile. So this is like some links I am sending. So this is few links we are sending. We can write also something extra, but it's not mandatory. So you send some data, and this is the array. Now how we send this nav data array inside our navigation menu? So look at the navigation menu. Maybe I will just hide it for now. Yeah, so in here in the navigation menu, if I want to send this array, the same way you can send, you can write again data, it's okay. You can write also, okay, state. So it's a state data, anything you can write. So data equal to, will write the same name, it's okay. But in this case, as I said, I'm trying to use a different name. You can use still the same name if you like. Yeah, so you can write here data is nav data. It's an array we are sending inside navigation menu. And in the navigation menu, how he will receive it, because in the header component, which is a class component, you see here class component, we write this dot props. Inside render we can see the data, but now it's a functional component, and in the functional component inside the return you cannot write console log. You see there is already error. If I write console log, some error is coming, so I cannot write it here. I have to write it outside of the render. Even in a class component we write outside of return, so you cannot write inside return, and functional component does not have render, so you have to write it outside of return. Here you can write it, but if I write here this dot props, it will not work, because this only we use for class component, not for functional component. That means I can only write props. So props is okay, I can only write props. But the thing is, if I write props, they will not understand, because in class component by default, if you write this dot props, they will understand, because class component is very powerful. They understand when you send data, or if you don't even send any data, still if you write this dot props, class component have something. It's coming from React component, You see it's extending from React component, but functional component is simple, and when you do it, functional component will not see anything. Let me refresh, and you see props is not defined because props is like an argument, it's coming from another place. So you have to write here in the navigation menu function. If you write props, then they will understand. Okay, so you are sending, but it's not mandatory. So as I said, in the functional component you should not write, you don't need to write state or props, that is normal, but in functional component you have to write. So if I write here props, what is happening? Console log props, and now we can see the array. Probably if I refresh, yeah, I see a data of 5 array. So I see a data, the word, and a array values. Now for all of these, YouTube, home, profile, all of them, I can now display them. So I can display them many ways. I can also send them like object, but then I need many keys for each of them. I need a key 1, key 2, different keys, but I send like array, so it's absolutely okay. After now, if you have props, inside props you have an array, but where is the data? Is inside props dot data. You can see it again. So it's inside here. You see props dot data is this one, and now we will display this. How we will display this? If I want to show the data for all of them, I need to do a map, because if you remember, this is a array, this is a array value, array of data. That means you need to do a map for array. So it's very simple. Let's write it here, so you will understand. I will not remove the previous code. If you want to do a array and a for loop or anything in the Reactjs, so easy way would be, you have to write, there is a way they can do it. It's called curly bracket. You will write inside the curly bracket, go to the next line. You can even give a condition here, but we don't need a condition. So what we will do, we will write down props dot data. So props dot data is my array, and then I will do a map. Yeah, so in the map I will just add different kinds of things. So we know that this is pure JavaScript map, and you see the map is having a callback function where you have a value and index and different kinds of thing array you can write. So we write here a arrow function. In the arrow function we write down, so for each item or each value, you can write anything you like. For each value coming from the state, and there is the index we can write also, and then it will actually have something back. So in this case you will see small problems, but let's see what is we have to do now. So for each value, so value means for each item from the map, we will just show a anchor. So I'll maybe copy this. Yeah, so now I have facebook.com, but we have a small problem here. Yeah, so here in this line, if I write down now Facebook, I press Alt Z, that's why it's now showing me in a nice way, but you can make your screen is big, you can make it big also. So if I remove the Facebook, and then if I write down value, so the first value I have, and it's not an object. So then if I save it, there should be some kind of problem. Let me see the problem first. If I refresh, yeah, it's saying array prototype map expect a return value from the arrow function array callback return. So when you use the map inside Reactjs and for an array, then you need to return the value. So that's very simple solution. Before this anchor, you just need to write return space, and that's enough. So he will now return it. Now you see different error. So now look at this one. We'll fix this error later, but look at this one. I have Facebook, Google, YouTube, home, profile. So actually they all are coming in one single color, and then the rest of, so this is our previous code and this is the new code coming from the array. Why? Because I use just fixed anchor, fixed website link, class name, and they are just taking them. But if you make it in like an object, if you make it an object like which link, which name, which color, then it will be also working that way, exactly this way. Yeah, so now it's not happening because we write it like an array, and then in an array we write each item. But if you write it a different way, as I said, like now I have only value for only this part, the Facebook, the name of the level. But then if you want to put something for class name, then you have to give a object and give different value, a link, so that you can do. But there is also second problem. This is one problem, but it's easy to fix. But the second problem, you see, we see warning, each child in a list should have a unique key. So every time you have a map and in Reactjs, and they need to be actually returned back. When they return, they need a unique ID for each value, each child. So this is each anchor is a child value, and finally it will return, but then they need a key. So the easy solution, you can actually put something. We can write it like this. Let me write it. I'll cut it. So better way would be we write it like this. Okay, so then we'll separate each part and see is it working still. So it's perfectly working, and then we'll just fix the error for the key. So you can write a class name and then you write a key as they're saying in the browser console log, and the key value. So in this case the key need a unique value, it could be ID or anything. In this case we have an index. So each item has index number 0, 1, 2, 3, something like this. You write directly index, and that error should not be exist here now. If we refresh, so this is the previous error. Now you see there is no error. We see few names, 5 names. The other thing is, so this is the difficult part is done. But now the thing is, how can I see it exactly like this? So this is also easy. Let's write it in a different way. So I'll write it not value, I'll write down or keep it value. Maybe here I will make now not a array. Yeah, so I will make object. So array of object. What I will do, I will make a object, and in the object I will write down few properties. Name is Facebook. Okay, and then link, the web link, which is www.facebook.com class, or we can write maybe the design. We can write anything, and in this case our design for Facebook was button primary. So I'll show you quickly a simple example, not all of them. So this is one object you have, and then if you have the second object, so then you write maybe Facebook, and then you write Google, and then yeah, it's very simple, Google, and then for this you can write success, yeah, double C, and then the next one you can write okay, YouTube, and then for this one maybe I write danger. So now this is the object. I can write a big object and send them. All of this is inside now something called nav data. Inside nav data I am sending it, and then in the navigation he will receive it inside the value. And then we can write here, we can say okay, anchor, and then anchor have something, anchor should have inside here. So it should be value dot link, because I write here link, value dot link. You can see again link, value dot name, value dot design. Yeah, so value dot link is this, and then here this part should be value dot design, and the last one is a value dot name. So if I write like this way, and I should see now, I will see 3 more. How many I write? Yeah, 3 of them in different colors. So let's go and then see if there is any error. Refresh. Yeah, now I see Facebook, Google, YouTube. Only 3, because I write in an array these 3, but not all of them. So yeah, there is no error, and this is working perfectly. Okay, so then if it is working, then you don't need so now it's dynamic, we don't need something like this. We can remove them and only see the part which is coming from the props. Okay, so perfectly is coming. Now we see that how we can send data from also in a functional component. So this is a functional component, that was a class component. In class component you write this dot props. Now the question is, okay, if this navigation has his own state, what will happen? The navigation menu, then he can write something here, anything he can write. He can write still state is also okay. He can write his own state. He say, okay, I have a state. So it's like his own data. He can write yeah, he can write maybe site 1, site name or something. Then he can say, okay, the site is test site, or we can write maybe www, or we can write here home. So home is the name of the site, and we can provide after this map, we can also still provide 2 more links. Yeah, that's also possible. So you can write links. In this case you can write, okay, button success primary warning. Yeah, it's bootstrap links. If you don't know bootstrap, then it will be little bit difficult to know what is between button warning. And then we can say, yeah, so you can write something manually here, and this will be his data. Yeah, but yeah, let's look into this one. I don't want to spend more time and write everything. So you can, after this map is finished, you can still just write another anchor outside of the map. So they will add this, they will add this. So here if I write down now what I write here on the top, so I said, okay, site is home. So this should be, now this data is coming from, not from value, it's outside, it's from a state, his own state, state dot site, or state dot, yeah, we can write a state dot, okay, I write in the wrong place, because this should be actually not link, it should be design. So this is design for the anchor, and yeah, we need a bracket comma here, and also first one is link design name. Okay, name, this is design, and this should be link. Okay, for the link maybe I'll write down just home, like this /home, if I have a home page in different pages, different routes. So now if I write down state dot link, state dot, so every place will be a state, but in this case I don't need the key because it's not inside the map anymore. So if I write, so look at this one, now this is a state data, and previous this data is value, data is from props. Yeah, so 2 different data. Now you should see home also in the top menu. So the home is also coming, it's a state data, and all this data is props data. Okay, perfect. So we see that how we can send something here to there using a functional component, also in a class component. Now how can I write the same way, because in the class component we did not write his own state, we send something from functional component. But yeah, of course we can send something, because every class component has something called constructor. So if you already know the constructor, every class component has a constructor. Inside there you can write a state, but if you write it inside there, you need to write down something like super. So super means he is actually getting inheritance. So header is the inheritance of app.js, and he need actually all the features from there. And then if you write state here, you have to write this dot state, and then you can write something here, like we can say is saying, okay, welcome to welcome message website. We can actually also write something more. We can say happy message, just a message. You can say I am happy. Okay, so that's the sample message. This message is a state data, And this state data you can also write it here. We can maybe write it much better way. Got it? Yeah. So now I have a h1. Inside h1 I have first prop message. So 2 prop message, and I will now try my data for my state. So in this case, if I write this dot state dot and happy message, so this is coming from this one. This is your normal data, and then state have this data. If you go now in the website, you see, okay, hello, this is coming, this part is from the props, and this is his own state. Yeah, so 2 part is coming correctly. Yeah, but it's not mandatory that you can write constructor, super, all these for a state. You can actually comment them. Let me first save it, console. Yeah, and then so this is like a normal way how you write it, but there is also different way in new React.js. There is update that you can actually write state without giving this or anything, without creating constructor. You don't need to write a constant for class component because they don't need type. So you write a state, and so a state is object, and you can directly also use this one. And the rest of the part you have to write, of course, this dot happy and other things, and you see still it's working. So I write a state directly without inside the constructor. So constructor function is not mandatory in this case. Yeah. So then perfectly we see this data. Okay, so we'll see also now how can we play with them, like how can now this data is coming from top to bottom as we see in the slide. So this data is coming, from, if you see here, yeah, top to bottom like this way. Now we need to also see how it's going from down to top. Okay, so in the next video I will show this part.